In 2012, Nintendo did something that almost no public company ever does on purpose. It lost money. For 3 consecutive fiscal years, the company that made Mario posted an operating loss. Its newest console was selling badly. Analysts called for a strategy change. They called for mobile games. They called for the company to put its characters on rival hardware. Nintendo's response, in effect, was to do almost nothing and to wait. How does a company survive losing money for 3 years and treat it as essentially routine? And why is a firm that has been in business since 1889 still here at all, when the taxi company it once ran, the instant rice business it once ran, and the love hotel chain it once ran are all long gone? The answer is a doctrine, a deliberate 100-year-old refusal to fight the fight that everyone expects it to fight. This is Market Cap Stories. Today, how Nintendo refuses to win. Let's start with the simple, strange fact of Nintendo's age. The company was founded in Kyoto in 1889, the same decade the Eiffel Tower was built. Its original product was Hanafuda, hand-painted Japanese playing cards. For its first 70 years, Nintendo was, essentially, a card and toy company. No electronics, no software, just paper, ink, and craft. Here is the part that most company histories skip past too quickly. Between the 1950s and the 1960s, Nintendo's leadership, under the founder's great-grandson, Hiroshi Yamauchi, tried to escape the card business by diversifying into almost anything. It launched a taxi company. It launched a chain of short-stay love hotels. It launched an instant rice product. It even sold a toy vacuum cleaner. Every single one of those ventures failed. All of them. And this is the first crucial fact of the Nintendo story. The company we know today, the company worth tens of billions of dollars, is the survivor of a long, documented string of failures. Nintendo did not succeed by being right. It succeeded by surviving being wrong repeatedly, and then being patient enough to recognize what actually worked. I want to pause on that distinction because it matters for how you read every company in this series. When we study a successful business, we tend to assume that its leaders saw the future clearly, that success was the reward for a correct prediction. But that is mostly a story we tell afterward. The taxi company, the rice, the love hotels, those were not half-hearted experiments. At the time, they were serious attempts to find Nintendo's future. The leadership genuinely did not know which one would work. What separated Nintendo from the companies that died was not better forecasting. It was that Nintendo could afford to be wrong several times in a row and was still standing when one attempt finally worked. Survival, not prediction, is the skill. What worked, eventually, was toys. In the 1960s and 70s, a young Nintendo engineer named Gunpei Yokoi began designing simple, clever playthings, an extending mechanical hand, light gun games, small electronic novelties. And Yokoi articulated a design philosophy that would quietly become the spine of the entire company. He called it, in translation, lateral thinking with withered technology. That phrase deserves a full, careful explanation, because it is the single most important idea in this episode. Lateral thinking with withered technology. Withered technology means technology that is old, cheap, well understood, and mass-produced. Components that were cutting edge a decade ago and are now commodities, reliable, abundant, and almost free. The conventional instinct in any technology business is the opposite. You chase the newest, fastest, most powerful component available, and you pay a steep premium for being early. Yokoi argued that this instinct was, for a toy company, a trap. New technology is expensive. It is unreliable. It is hard to manufacture at scale. And crucially, everyone has access to it at roughly the same time. So it confers no lasting advantage. Yokoi's alternative was this. Take a piece of cheap, mature, thoroughly proven technology and apply it in a way nobody has thought of. The advantage does not come from the component. It comes from the idea. And an idea, unlike a faster chip, cannot simply be bought off a shelf by a competitor. The clearest proof of this doctrine is the Game Boy, released in 1989. By the standards of its own time, the Game Boy was technically poor. Its screen was not color. It was a dull greenish gray. Its processor was years behind the competition. Rival handhelds launched soon after with full-color screens and far stronger hardware. The Game Boy crushed all of them. It outsold every color rival for a decade because the Withered technology made it cheap, made it durable, and, critically, made its battery last for many hours on a few cells. A child could afford it. A child could drop it and it would survive. A child could play it on a long journey without the batteries dying. The color rivals were better machines and worse products. Nintendo had not built the best handheld. It had built the right one. Let me draw out the financial logic underneath that, because it is sharper than it first appears. A component that is new is also, almost always, expensive and supply constrained. If you build your product around it, three things happen. Your unit cost is high, so either your price is high or your margin is thin. Your manufacturing is fragile because a young component has not yet been refined into cheap, reliable mass production. And your supply depends on whoever makes that component, who can raise their price or favor a rival. A Withered component inverts all three. It is cheap because years of competition have driven its price down. It is reliable because the manufacturing is mature, and it is abundant, available from many suppliers at a commodity price. So Yokoi's doctrine is not nostalgia for old technology. It is a hard-headed recognition that for a consumer product sold to children at a low price, mature components give you better economics, better reliability, and a stronger supply chain, all at once. The Withered part sounds like a weakness. In the unit economics, it is the opposite. And there is a competitive dimension that is easy to miss. When everyone can buy the same newest chip, hardware power becomes a race that nobody durably wins. This year's fastest console is matched by our rivals within a cycle or two. Spending to be the most powerful buys you a lead measured in months. But an idea, a genuinely original way of using cheap, proven parts, is not on any shelf. A competitor cannot simply order it. They would have to think of it themselves, and then convince their own organization to pursue it. That is the deeper reason Yokoi's doctrine is a strategy and not just a cost-saving measure. It moves the competition off the axis where money alone wins and onto the axis of imagination, where Nintendo chose to be strong. Cheap, clever hardware is only half of Nintendo's structure. The other half is the single most valuable asset the company owns, and it does not appear at full value on any balance sheet. It is the characters. Think about what Nintendo actually owns. It owns Mario, one of the most recognized fictional characters on the planet, recognized by small children who cannot yet read. It owns Zelda, Donkey Kong, Metroid, Pokemon, which is, by lifetime revenue, the highest grossing media franchise in human history. These characters were not bought. They were created in-house decades ago and have been owned outright ever since. Here is why that matters in financial terms. A character that a generation grew up loving is an asset with almost no decay. A processor becomes obsolete in 3 years. Mario does not become obsolete. A parent who loved Mario as a child introduces Mario to their own child. The asset does not depreciate. It compounds across generations. Think carefully about the word depreciation. In accounting, depreciation is the recognition that most assets lose value as they age. A factory machine wears out. A vehicle wears out. A piece of technology becomes outdated and worth less every year. Most of what a company owns is slowly dying. But a beloved character behaves in the opposite way. Each year, a new cohort of children meets Mario for the first time. Each year, some of the adults who already love Mario have children of their own and pass the affection on. The asset's audience is not shrinking toward obsolescence. It is renewing and even expanding. An asset that grows more valuable simply by the passage of time is extraordinarily rare. Nintendo owns a whole shelf of them, and it created every one itself. And the characters do something strategically powerful for the hardware business. They make Nintendo's consoles non-substitutable. If you want to play the new Mario game or the new Zelda game, there is exactly one place on Earth you can do it: on Nintendo hardware. A rival console may be faster, cheaper, more powerful, and it still cannot sell you a Mario game. The characters are a moat that competitors are legally forbidden to cross. A skeptic would push back here, and the pushback is fair. If the characters are so valuable, why not put them everywhere? Why not sell Mario games on rival consoles, on every phone, on every platform, and collect the money from all of them? That is exactly what analysts demanded for years. And the reason Nintendo refused is the reason the whole strategy holds together. If Nintendo sold its games on every platform, it would, in the short term, make a great deal of money. That is true. But it would also destroy the one reason anyone buys a Nintendo console at all. Walk the logic through slowly. Today, a family buys a Nintendo console specifically to get Mario, Zelda, and the rest. The console is the gate. The characters are the key. The moment you can play Mario on a phone you already own, the gate disappears. You no longer need the console at all. Nintendo would win the software sale and lose the hardware platform. And the hardware platform is what lets it control the entire experience, the entire ecosystem, and the entire margin. In strategic terms, Nintendo is choosing to protect a platform rather than maximize a transaction. A transaction is one sale. A platform is the right to make every future sale on your own terms, in your own environment, at your own price. Selling Mario everywhere would convert a durable platform into a series of one-time transactions. More money this year, far less control, and far less money every year after. Now, Nintendo did eventually move into mobile. Carefully. Late. On its own terms. It released mobile games that were, in effect, advertisements. Small, limited experiences designed to draw players toward the real product, the console, and the full games. The mobile titles were a funnel, not a destination. The crown jewels, the major Mario and Zelda releases, stayed locked to Nintendo hardware. The company gave the market a taste of what it had been demanding for years, and gave it in a shape that protected the platform anyway. This is the pattern you see again and again with Nintendo. It does not refuse new markets forever. It refuses to enter them in a way that would damage the core. It moves late, deliberately, and only on a structure that keeps the platform intact. Now we come to the piece of the Nintendo story that makes the patience actually possible. Because patience is not free. A company that refuses to chase short-term money, that is willing to lose an entire hardware generation without panicking, needs something very specific to survive that choice. It needs cash. An enormous, almost unreasonable amount of cash. Nintendo is famous among people who read balance sheets for one striking thing. It holds a vast reserve of net cash. Cash far in excess of any debt. At various points, that reserve has been measured in the many billions of dollars. Enough, by some estimates, to fund the company's entire operations for years with no revenue at all. Investors have for decades complained about this. A large cash pile earning little interest is in conventional corporate finance considered inefficient. The textbook says return it to shareholders or invest it aggressively. Activist investors have pushed Nintendo more than once to do exactly that. But look at what the cash actually buys. It buys the ability to be wrong. When the Wii U, Nintendo's console of the early 2010s, sold poorly, the company did not face a crisis of survival. It faced a disappointing year. It absorbed the losses out of the reserve, kept its development teams employed, kept its characters in-house, and quietly built the next console. That next console was the Switch, which became one of the best-selling game consoles of all time. Connect the two facts. A company without a cash fortress, facing a failed console, is forced into panic decisions, layoffs, fire sales, selling its best assets onto rival platforms just to raise money. Nintendo's reserve means it never has to. The cash is not idle. The cash is what allows the patience to exist at all. It is the financial precondition for the entire strategy. Step back, and the whole shape of Nintendo's history comes into view. It is not a smooth line of success. It is a repeating cycle of near death and recovery. Consider the cycle. In the early 1980s, the entire video game industry in North America collapsed. A famous crash that wiped out most of the market. Nintendo entered that ruined market anyway, with the Nintendo Entertainment System, and rebuilt the industry around itself. Then, in the mid-90s, Nintendo made a serious error. It kept its console on cartridge technology, while its rival, Sony, moved to the compact disc. The disc was cheaper for game developers to use, and developers left Nintendo for the PlayStation in large numbers. Nintendo lost its leadership of the entire industry in that single generation. It did not collapse. It absorbed the loss and continued. Then the GameCube, in the early 2000s, sold modestly. Another disappointing generation. Then the Wii, using cheap motion sensing technology, pure Withered technology doctrine, became a runaway global hit. Then the Wii U failed badly. Then the Switch became a historic success. Win, loss, win, loss, win. The pattern is not an accident. It is the visible signature of a company that takes real creative risks, accepts that many will fail, and has built itself financially and culturally to survive the failures long enough to reach the next success. The obvious question, for anyone who has followed the logic this far, is the same question we asked of Costco and of WeWork. If the strategy works, why has no rival simply copied it? The answer is that the strategy is not a tactic. It is a culture, and culture cannot be purchased. Nintendo's rivals in the console business are divisions of vast electronics and software conglomerates. For those parent companies, the logic of raw technical power, the fastest processor, the sharpest graphics, is the natural language of the whole organization. A games division inside a giant electronics firm is structurally pushed to compete on specifications because that is what the rest of the company knows how to do. Nintendo is the opposite. It is, at its core, still a toy company, a company whose founding instinct, from the Hanafuda cards onward, is play, craft, and delight, not horsepower. Its design culture genuinely believes that a clever, cheap, joyful idea beats an expensive, powerful, joyless one. A rival cannot adopt that belief by deciding to. It would have to rebuild its entire organization around it, which the parent conglomerate will never allow. So Nintendo's moat is not one thing. It is three things braided together. Owned characters that rivals are legally barred from using. A withered technology design culture that rivals are structurally unable to adopt. And a cash fortress that lets the company absorb its own mistakes without panic. Any one of those could be competed with. All three together, held for decades, cannot. So what is the durable lesson here? The part worth carrying into the next case. The lesson is not always use old technology. That would be too literal, and it would miss the point. The lesson is about the difference between competing and choosing. Most companies compete. They line up against rivals on the same axis, the obvious axis, and try to be better at the same thing. Nintendo does something rarer. It looks at the axis everyone is competing on, raw technical power, and it simply declines to race there. It chooses a different axis entirely. Design, character, joy, and durability. And it pairs that choice with the two things that make an unconventional choice survivable. Assets that cannot be copied. The characters. And a balance sheet strong enough to be wrong for years without dying. Strategy is not only about choosing the right path, it is about being able to afford the path you chose, especially in the years it has not yet paid off. A company founded to sell painted playing cards in 1889 is still here. Not because it guessed the future correctly, but because it built itself to survive guessing wrong. It kept its characters. It kept its cash. It kept its refusal to race where everyone else was racing. In a market full of companies sprinting to be the most powerful, the most advanced, the most current, Nintendo is a reminder that the most durable strategy is sometimes to pick a fight nobody else is having, and to be rich enough and patient enough to keep having it. If this is the kind of strategic anatomy you find useful, subscribe to Market Cap Stories. We will see you in the next case.